Now, the Nigerian Governors Forum has reaffirmed their request for the introduction of a state police system in the country. I have with me Onyekachi Adekoya, is the Managing Director of PR24, and he joins me to discuss how this can change the security outcomes in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Onyekachi.
Thanks for having me.
So when you look at the policing system in Nigeria, what would you say first is the biggest challenge before we even start to clamor for state policing?
I think that the successive history we've had with the military has caused the evolving of a unitaristic system of managing security in Nigeria, and that's the biggest problem. Now you're looking at population explosion. The UN did say we are almost about 200 million right now. Some would argue almost 220 million. The average UN ratio of a police to population should sit around average of 1 to 400. If you do 400 by 200 million, we should be having an average minimum number of police of about 500,000. So the structure we have currently cannot sustain the rate at which the society is changing and population is also exploding. You then look at the effects of desertification, climate change, and rural-urban migration, sometimes urban to rural migration by explosion, because most of the city centers are being overrun by population expansion. And you look at the struggle for access to resources, land, water, and the effects of that discussion on the northeast, northwest, around the borders with Cameroon, which is also causing all this flaring up of community issues. So Nigeria is too diverse for a central kind of policing arrangement. If you look at the modern principles of state policing or modern principles of policing, policing should be such that takes policing and the responsibility of policing to the doorsteps of the people. So Nigeria is at that point where the current arrangement can no longer sustain itself.
So you are all for state policing?
No, absolutely, that's the way to go.
All right, but when you just said the fact that we're very diverse and all that, but then for me, I look at the fact that I see that there's a strong, huge trust deficit in between the public and the police in itself. Those are some of the issues that I think should be also kind of addressed before we even venture into say, let's split up this new system.
Yes, so that trust deficit is caused by the spirit of the law that did set up the current police structure that we have. The policing system we have was set up by the colonial masters. It was set up to protect interests not of Nigerians. It was set up commercial interests, other mining interests of some other people. It's not our own policing structure. So what the populace and what even the police is even arguing for now is we must now own the police. Create a police that is owned by the people, if we can say in tenets of democracy, for the people, by the people. Okay, so I think that's a deeper clamor than the surface level issues you see. Some people argue, okay, if you give the police, state police to the governors, they will abuse office and abuse powers and abuse privileges. That's an argument to make. But however, the benefits of having a state police far outstrips any concern that you can have in the short term.
I want us to get into those benefits because I'm looking at the situation, and first I look back. The first thing I think of when you even tell me state policing, I look at elections in Nigeria.
Yes.
We understand how tense things can get in there. And then when you look at the various interests that are available within, especially in that period.
Yes.
Personally, I really still feel strongly about that system of allowing the states to handle this policing.
Is that not happening with the current system?
No, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, especially when you look at the situation around elections.
Yes.
I'm not going to mention this, but we are hearing about governors, stockpiling arms during just before an election process, and I'm thinking, what are these arms for?
So it's a good question and a good concern to have, but the argument I will make is that if that is already happening now, I don't see why we should have that fear in the case of having a state police, because the federal government and whoever controls federal might also is using the current police setup to his or her own advantage in furtherance of their pursuit of power. So that's even not an argument to make at all, whether now or then.
Okay, let's look at the merits and the demerits. So because I want to see on two hands, what would you say is the strongest point for state policing?
Ownership. A governor is by law the CSO, the Chief Security Officer of a state. We did see last year that one of the governors in Zamfara did resign. He claimed to have resigned as a CSO because his claim was that he doesn't control the levers of use of force in his state. Understandably, you can understand his reasons for that. Now, when you have a state commissioner of police that is from the state, you know his local government, he is not going to be transferred to another state. After his tenure, he's coming back to the same community. No federal transfer. There's a deeper sense of ownership, accountability, and responsibility. When you then talk about because the current federal government setup is trying to push community policing, the state governors are pushing for state policing. You cannot even do community policing if you don't start first with state policing. So that whole structure of ownership, the sense of it is our police. Remember, there are 9 principles to modern state policing as propagated by Sir Robert Peel. The first principle simply says that you must take policing to the doorstep of the people. Number 2, policing should be such that it is owned by the people. Another point they also propagate there is to say that a policeman, ideally, is a civilian in police uniform. And the powers that the police has draws from the civilian, not from the state towards the civilian. So when you devolve, and we have a bit of a paradigm shift.
Very quickly, let's look at how this can be abused. Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, there will be fights between the federal police and the state police of respective states. But those fights would later be resolved maybe by the courts. There will be some disagreements. That's the worst case I see. A president wants to go this way. Remember, in a federal system, the ideals of a federal system is that they are federating units. The president is CEC. The state governor is an executive. Is also CSO of his own state. So, I mean, the worst cases, there will be in the short term some disagreements, some abuse of offices, but in the long term, things will eventually smoothen out, and Nigerians will be the better for it.
All right, then. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see how things go if we finally get that state policing structure in Nigeria. I've been speaking to Onyekachi Adekoya. He's the Managing Director of PR24.